The biopic, a staple in the so-called prestige branch of cinema, designated for adults with a more mature palate. The retelling of the story of a notable person. No matter who you may be, the likelihood that you've encountered a biopic is high. From the Oscar-nominated to the Oscar hopefuls, biopics make up a significant portion of the dramatic works released by the major studios. It's also become very common to mock the traditional Wikipedia article made on celluloid biopic, which many major biopics fall into, with those about musicians being the easiest target in just how formulaically they're packaged. A simple retelling of a person's life with easily markable plot points isn't interesting, especially after decades of this regurgitation. So what if I were to say that a great biopic, a truly insightful biopic, arises from the less conventional? That is what I'm saying. That's the video. Biopics are complicated things. The focal characters who inhabit them are not fictional and are based off of real people. This claim doesn't quite so rigidly extend to the supporting cast. On many an occasion, the people the biopic revolves around, or people closely connected to the subject, are behind the camera with input. With this input, the story is often diffused and diluted. The truth can be bent to make certain people appear more favourable than they truly are in reality. This has the potential to weaken the thematic argument of the film, but not always. A key distinction that I would like to declare for the sake of my entire point before the risk of implosion rears its ugly head. Biopics are not documentaries. Documentaries should be wholly truthful, with zero creative liberties when it comes to the reality on which they comment. With biopics, I'm much more lenient when it comes to how filmmakers decide on their handling of the truth. And that is where the key crux of this video emerges. I don't want a hard-ruled truth to dictate the story of a biopic. A film's runtime isn't enough to provide ample time on every little detail of a figure's life. But to get to the core of their public perception, that is what I believe should be the goal of any biopic. What is it that makes person X worth making an entire film about? How are they different from people Y and Z? And how can the form of a given film contextualize that person for an audience who may or may not be aware of person X? In my opinion, the best biopics use formalism and a general discard of an exact truth to bring the subject to life. Narrative motion pictures still fundamentally revolve around narrative, so why should the core mechanics of story, i.e. theme, conflict, personal expression and a je ne sais quoi directly tied to the unfurling of plot, be put to the wayside? I think it's much more interesting if a film goes into details surrounding the public perceptions of a person, what they're known for, and how they're seen as an individual, rather than as a checklist of events which filmmakers have to cross off. I've split the theme-forward biopics into 4 distinct layers. 1. The reflective, moderately conventional. 2. The formalist, moderately conventional. 3. The biopic as character study. And 4. The absolute abstraction. For each and every one of them, I have lined up a film for analysis. Handily the most underrated film I'm giving an entire segment to is Jojo Dancer Your Life is Calling, from 1986. Please don't click away. I get that Jojo Dancer isn't exactly a big film that many people would be familiar with, but I think it's an interesting first layer to this examination of expressionist biopics. It's the gateway into the more abstract, also being constrained moderately by convention. The subject of this particular biopic is a thinly veiled Richard Pryor, the stand-up comic, who goes by the pseudonym Jojo Dancer. More importantly, however, is this film's role as an autobiopic, what I've chosen to dub the autobiographical picture. Much like Steven Spielberg would do 40 years later with The Fabelmans, Jojo Dancer Your Life is Calling was written, produced, directed by Pryor and, to one-up Spielberg's autobiopic, he stars in the title role. And this was all the way back in 1986. The obvious signifier for this film's departure from reality is the use of an alter ego, the eponymous Jojo Dancer. So what is this film about? What does the formalism on display signify about Pryor's life? Jojo Dancer Your Life is Calling is, from the moment the narrative starts, about regret and looking back at life without rose-tinted glasses. Fiction is a protective layer, but Pryor goes deeper than most others, with the added complication that he is directly crafting the film. This is no sentimental examination of the comedian. It's dark and it is distressing, as Pryor is clearly working through the traumas which he was moulded by. Regret is the thematic through line here, and everything in the film orbits that central, controlling idea. To begin, the membrane between Jojo and Pryor is thinned, practically transparent from the very beginning. This is an emotionally vulnerable deconstruction, and it all boils down to how the narrative is framed. A major point in Pryor's life is his self-immolation, which has since been confirmed to have been a suicide attempt brought on by cocaine-induced psychosis. In the instance of many biopics influenced by the estates of subjects, such an event would likely be edited around in favour of a much more flowery portrayal of the focal individual. Pryor took this traumatic experience and used it as the fundamental crux around which his biopic would revolve around. Yes, Jojo is superficially a different person to Pryor, but the embrace of actual true-to-life fact blurs the boundaries of fiction. The very fact that his self-immolation, only happening 6 years before the film's release, is the first major occurrence in the film, sets up the framing device perfectly. Depression and self-harm lead to. The primary source of formalism is the journey through his memories that Jojo Dance's alter ego, known as alter ego, also played by Pryor, undergoes, reflecting on fragments of his life, like in It's a Wonderful Life. The alter ego even interacts with the younger versions of Jojo, talking to them. His self-destructive cycles are reflected on by the alter ego and the hospitalized, bedridden Jojo Dancer in the present day. The moments themselves are constructed in a somewhat formulaic manner, following the string of individual moments that most biographical pictures are built around. The additional layer that is the active participation of the alter ego in the engagement with Jojo's past is what elevates the film from the realm of the traditional biopic. It's got the rags to riches story, which is a fundamental part of many lesser biopics, yet the fall which comes with the riches isn't swept under the rug in the second half. The film is dictated by that fall of personal grace. The unfurling of the story is directly tied to the inciting instant that is the self-immolation. His numerous failed relationships with women, his turn to drug use, all of it, for the audience, is held with the knowledge of where Jojo ends up. It all makes the final turn in Jojo's arc, where he moves on past the regret which holds him down, striving to survive, all the more impactful. The lingering regret which flavours the present-day stage of Jojo's life, commenting on the self-destructive cycles, adds a texture to the conventional structure by lifting the fictionalized moments to a thematically unified whole. Acceptance of life after self-destruction and regret is what drives this film above the rest of the hollow, aesthetically driven biopics. Jojo Dancer, as a metonymy being when a smaller symbol is emblematic for a larger conceptual whole, for the identity of Richard Pryor, is driven by the regret and acceptance of life that is the film's thematic propeller. It may not be truthful to a T, even going so far as to shield fragments of Pryor with fictionalized accounts of events, but it is still incredibly functional as a story about self-destructive individuals who are able to learn to grow from their experiences and self-destruction. I don't think the film would be as effective if it had merely been a straightforward, entirely factually accurate, whatever that actually means, biopic. This is something that will be made clearer the more the video goes on, but I'm a huge fan of the theatricality and embellishment that these biopics are capable of. I think the perspective provided by the autobiopic makes a full transparency unlikely, so the bending of truth is something that I'm willing to go with, as, without it, I doubt that Pryor would have been able to make the rest of the film in such an emotionally truthful manner. If that makes sense. I'm down for superficial truth being lessened for the sake of an emotional one. Next up is the most recent film on this list, something so bizarre in its construction that I had to include it here. The film in question is the 2024 musical biopic, Better Man, which had a production budget of $110 million. I don't give an iota of a fuck about budgets usually. The final film is all that really matters to me, but it strikes me as an anomaly in the risk-averse contemporary cinematic landscape that usually never touch such a project. This film is about the pop star Robbie Williams, who is a rather prominent name here in the UK, but I understand his lack of a cultural footprint abroad, such as in the US. The first, most unskippable formalist level of this film is the fact that Williams voiced a simian reflection of himself. Like Richard Pryor before him, Better Man has the biopic's subject as a crucial collaborator in the creation of the film and in the performance of the protagonist. But let's not beat around the bush. Better Man is notable because of the monkey on the poster. Robbie Williams is made out to be a performing monkey, reflective of his own lived experience, which he likens to, well, a performing monkey. According to Williams himself, he perceives his turn into pop stardom as being used by the people around him as an attraction to be watched. Immediately, this shifts the focus away from the stereotypical music biopic focus, which is the rise to stardom, although the film itself does feature one, to one of self-perception instead. Just the replacement of that thematic drive does a lot to differentiate Better Man from its contemporaries. And, to make this controlling idea obvious through the very fabric of the film, the decision to quite literally portray Williams as an ape among normal human beings cements the separation between him and the rest of the world, even from a young age. Another key distinction Better Man has which puts it at this tier of non-literal biopics is a matter of genre. This film is a jukebox musical. For those who are unaware, a jukebox musical utilises pre-existing songs to fuel the narrative. This film uses Robbie Williams songs. More musician biopics ought to do such a thing. The joy of musicals, the reason why I'm so enamoured with them, is the direct intertwining of pure audio-visual stimulus and emotional response. Rather than opt for a cookie-cutter performance of a song, where the audience's reaction is potentially the Leo click upon the recognition of a song they know at best, director Michael Gracey instead makes it so that each song serves a hyper-specific role within conveying the emotional landscape of Williams' life. Does this condense Williams' life into a few musical numbers? Sure. Yes, it does. Does this mean that the complexities of his life are likely to be skimmed over? In broad strokes, yes. But given the fact that movies are short and lives are long, the film is focused on the mental complexities of constantly performing and feeling dehumanized because of it. I don't care about the minutiae that the film skips over. What I do care about is how the songs are implemented in finely tuning an emotional reaction from myself, someone unfamiliar with Robbie Williams' music, before I'd caught the film in cinemas on Boxing Day, back in 24. The rock DJ scene, capturing Take That's rapid rise to fame in one extended wanna, with the best choreography from any film in recent memory, switching the costumes to match each distinct look for the group, elicits a fuck yeah sensation. She's the One contrasts the sweeping romance between Williams and Nicole Appleton with the melancholy of their complications with her status as a tragic, corporately owned pop star. Let Me Entertain You is... well, that's a video in itself for another day. On one level, the gradual unfolding of these events is, like Jojo Dance Your Life is Calling, similar to those of the traditional biopic. Certainly the musical biopic at bare minimum. However, what I want to get at here is how such a fundamentally formalist genre like the musical is able to condense time and convey to the audience the exact emotional nuances through dance and song, which other biopics are not capable of doing. The jukebox musical, the usage of Robbie Williams' own songs, then makes it so that the subject of the biopic and these stretches of condensed narrative time are inseparable. Does this make sense? Have I convoluted it all? To simplify, I think that the lack of realism found within the genre is able to make even the more quote-unquote basic progression of plot rely more heavily on expressionism. To have the formalism aid in the conceit that Robbie Williams is constantly performing. Hence, by smushing these two examples of formalism together into a cohesive whole, the reflection of Robbie Williams becomes clear on the thematic level. It takes the persona of the subject and distills it into a slightly abstracted version of the person. The person is deconstructed into thematic parts, which make for a compelling story. As we go down further into the list, certain aspects of abstraction will be furthered, but I think that, as the second layer of my tiers of formalist biopics, Better Man is emblematic of the reaches that even a somewhat standard biographical picture can reach and approach with ingenuity and a lack of strict fidelity to life. For this third part of the essay, we're focusing on Bronson by Nicolas Refn. Unlike Jojo Dance Your Life is Calling and Better Man, this is a film without the direct input of the subject. The subject? The famed British prisoner, born Michael Peterson, also known as Charles Bronson, also known as Charles Arthur Salvador as of 2014. The simplest version of things is that Salvador is the most notorious prisoner in UK history because of his violent past, which extended his initial 7-year-long prison sentence into one for life. His assault on guards and hostage-taking is what has made him such a prominent figure in British history, more so than his original crime, a post office robbery which included aggravated burglary, possession of a firearm, and assault. What Nicolas Refn uses this personality for is a deconstruction of the pursuit of fame. This is obvious from the very beginning, with the film's opening line.
My name's Charles Bronson, and all my life I've wanted to be famous.
It is this fame through which Refn captures the essence of Salvador, up until around 2008, which is when the film was released. As a result, when talking about the figure as he is presented in the film, I'll be calling the character Bronson. Bronson is a particularly complicated figure, and this video doesn't go deep into all the stuff that he's done. This is about how the film uses his persona, so if you're interested, please research for yourself. Back to the film. The film itself is a masterful mix of 90s to 2000s filmmaking excess, with a career best performance from Tom Hardy. Now, What does Bronson do to make this theme burst out of the seams of literal truth? The scene is narrated by Bronson's fictionalized interior monologue, brought to life by these segments, which take place in a vaudeville hall where he performs, donning makeup, directly to the audience. The fourth wall? Smashed. Or at least, on the one hand. The way that this direct address is utilized brings an uncomfortable intimacy to the audience's relationship to this film's Bronson. We get the full picture of how this vehicle for the theme of fame self-mythologizes. It's all performance, first and foremost. He acts, enhancing his image, emphasizing the craziness of the tabloid version of Bronson. It's in your face, it's abrasive, it's unnerving. Fame is a self-destructive force which he pursues, ultimately prolonging his sentence in order to achieve reaching it. Life itself is a stage where he, a one-man show, takes center stage. We, the audience, are watching him. We are fueling this delusion. His narcissism is stoked by our audience participation. It's a cycle. The desire for fame and the audience's buying into the self-involved spectacle keep on rolling, manifesting into this film's iteration of Bronson. The vaudeville show is also specifically a juxtaposition with his brutal, performatively extra-masculine violence, as it elevates such crudity into a high art. But then, there is another side to Bronson's vaudeville show. Yes, it is fundamentally meant to place the audience watching in the theatre's seats, but there's another detail here. The seats, in this formalist setting, are filled with out-of-focus masses. The audience is depersonalized, practically invisible as fully realized people. It only makes the actual, down-to-earth person seem all the more pathetic. The narcissism exhibited by the protagonist is, within the technical presentation of the narrative, no big deal. There is no real emotional investment in his gathering fame. It's all in that removal of the fourth wall, smashed to bits with yet another incredibly particular Tom Hardy accent, as if it were a mace, and the parasocial relationship between the populace and those plastered on tabloids. And now the actual violence. If you know Refn, you are likely acutely aware of his fascination with violence. Take his most widely accepted work, Drive. Drive is a character study of an emotionally unusual individual who's capable of great violence. Same goes for Valhalla Rising. And Only God Forgives. And the Pusher trilogy. And I'm going to assume Her Private Hell will have it too. And I'm guessing Maniac Cop will only have extremely grandiose and excessive violence. It is a clear staple of Refn's auto style, and Bronson is the only one of his films based off of a real person. And yet Refn doesn't tone down the violence. Here in the UK, like the vast majority of films discussed in my video essays thus far, this hasn't been an attempt to be edgy. It just kinda happened this way. Bronson is rated 18, which is the most adult rating a film can get, and it received that rating for two rather obvious reasons: hyper-stylized graphic violence, and the prevalence of particular genitalia. Violence is a lens with which Refn approaches masculinity. The connection has never been so transparent before or since. Bronson typically fights in the nude. According to Professor of Criminology at Birmingham University, David Wilson, in an article for The Guardian, he states that the film captures a core tenet of Bronson's personality amidst its inaccuracies. One aspect of Bronson, the man, that Bronson, the film, does get right is how camp Bronson was. He seemed to want to display his body because, I believed, he wanted to impress everyone that he really was a real man. Of course, Refn pushes this violence to gothic extremes, my wording adapting Wilson's own, in order to exaggerate the performance that is masculinity. So, with this film, the historical inaccuracies and veering into formalism is utilised to bring out themes surrounding societal perceptions of what it means to really be a man, and the connection between the upper echelons of masculine virtue with a man's tendency to revel in violence. By stripping down a person to what works for the thematic engine of a narrative, the way that Refn did here, a character study is built. The inaccuracies are not important. They're not unimportant, but this is narrative film we're talking about. Truth should be reserved for documentaries. This is a perfect mix of a historical spine and an author vision with particular recurring thematic interests. And now we reach the conclusion of these 4 layers of gradual abstraction. Where else could there really be to go? Well, I'll tell you. What if a filmmaker flipped a notable person inside out, grabbed the most prominent thing about them when it comes to their persona, made a film exclusively about that one thing? No real names, no thinly veiled pseudonyms, just that core thematic in. I'm Not There by Todd Haynes is that film. This is easily the superior of Bob Dylan biopics. A complete unknown may have innovated the traditional music biopic, narrowing down the focus to one moment in time, his transition to electric guitar, which creates a more meaningful story than the stereotypical biopic structure which Hollywood has inundated audiences with. But this is the good stuff. This takes the enigma that is Bob Dylan, born Robert Allen Zimmerman, and makes the entire film orbit around the multitudes of his public personalities. The film follows 6 different facets of Bob Dylan. These are Christian Bale as Jack / Pastor John, Marcus Carl Franklin as Woody / Chaplain Boy, Ben Whishaw as Arthur, Heath Ledger as Robbie, Richard Gere as Billy, and Cate Blanchett as Jude. May it be noted that the name Bob Dylan is avoided in its entirety, and the man himself is only addressed in archive footage as the film's closing image. The interweaving and intertwining of these 6 characters across the runtime is how Haynes is able to dissect the expansive public image of Dylan. The easiest way to describe this presentation comes from the film's final lines.
You got yesterday, today, and tomorrow all in the same room. There's no telling what can happen.
Moreover, according to Jody Mitchell in a 2010 interview, after the release of I'm Not There, but the point stands, everything about Bob is deception. Dylan's multiplicity has been the focus of his persona for many years now, and the different versions of him are the focal points of this film. The first of these figures I want to talk about is Arthur Rimbaud. Arthur plays the role of a narrator, talking in direct address and breaking the fourth wall. This incarnation of Dylan declares his meditations surrounding selfhood and existence. The name itself comes from the poet of the same name, using historical context in order to characterize this side of the musician as being philosophically minded. Arthur is the most detached from a sense of narrative. Instead, he serves as almost a narrator-like figure who surfaces intermittently across the other stories. It's flavouring for the other Dylans. I think that Jack / Pastor John and Robbie are then provided more straightforward narrative arcs. Jack moves on from his more outward-spoken pop culture status to a down-to-earth religious perspective brought on by an epiphany. Robbie is experiencing the inception and degradation of a relationship while suffering the side effects of fame, notably the paparazzi, who are an ever-present force in the periphery. Although not following a specific course of events, these are interpretations of elements of Bob Dylan's life, framed through the reflections that these characters are. Jack is the converter from Judaism to evangelical Christianity in the 1970s after his success as a folk singer, using terminology that was used to describe his art. Robbie is his retreat into domesticity after a motorcycle accident in 1966. These are condensed into 2 characters as Haynes continues to edit the film in a non-chronological manner, allowing for yesterday, today, and tomorrow to be all in the same room. What I think is more interesting than these 3 versions of Bob Dylan is the remaining 3, who are specifically mythologized, grander-than-life versions. The 3 mentioned prior are, in their presentation, normal, to put it succinctly. They are dramatizations of interpretations of Bob Dylan's life and persona as an enigmatic sort, but they refrain from significant formalism. The next 3 are imbued with that formalism, bending both truth and the concrete diegesis that the film takes place in. Alright, let's start with Woody. It's easy to look at Bob Dylan, the real guy, and Woody, and immediately notice the visual differences between the 2. But one thing to keep in mind with Dylan is the hidden, artificially shaped past. Bob Dylan specifically engineered a backstory for himself where he was a runaway orphan. Haynes takes this the one step further by making Woody an African-American boy who finds himself in different social circles. The roots of Dylan's politically imbued artistic identity are fabricated here to come from a need from the disenfranchised people to represent the time they are currently living through. It's an echo of Bob Dylan's own self-mythologizing. To add on to this even further is the choice of name. Similar to the dawning of Arthur Rimbaud by that iteration of this identity, Woody is specifically named after the folk singer, Woody Guthrie. This character's full name is, to be exact, Woody Guthrie. It is noted that Dylan was majorly influenced by Guthrie. Woody, the character, has the slogan, "This machine kills fascists," painted onto his guitar case. This slogan was painted on Guthrie's own guitar. Guthrie even appears in the narrative, bedridden and ill with Huntington's disease. This is truth put into the prism of this formalism. Bob Dylan did in fact visit Guthrie and play for him. This has been put into the younger artist who Woody, the character, represents, as far as Dylan's overarching life's narrative goes. The inspiration and the need for self-importance are contained in this character. Then comes Billy, named after the outlaw Billy the Kid. The cosmetics of westerns and cowboys is donned both to reflect Bob Dylan's music from the time, such as John Wesley Harding and the Basement Tapes, his Americana albums, and his involvement in the film Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. But what I think is more interesting compared to the aesthetic similarities is what this means for this presentation of Bob Dylan. I think that, by mimicking a well-known outlaw persona, Haynes draws allusions to Dylan's time when he was out of the limelight during his rural retreat, hiding from his own persona. His fame is likened to the reputation of Billy the Kid, and his desired disappearance is made to be similar to the abrupt vanishing of the famous outlaw. Billy even decries that he's never had the knack for music in order to keep his own identity hidden from people who snoop around it. But then, there's also the moment where Billy encounters Woody. The two most theoretically temporally separated of the two iterations come into direct contact. The guitar case returns, but most importantly, the two, albeit briefly, communicate. The two mythologized versions of Dylan are the ones who come together in the same scene. I think this is the synthesis of the film, the moment where the Ouroboros of Bob Dylan's continuous reinvention of the self makes itself concrete. This part of the film brings to life that facet of Bob Dylan's public persona, the enigma, through the use of formalism. I would also like to discuss a secondary angle through which Haynes depicts Bob Dylan. Still fundamentally a part of the cycle of reinvention, mind you, but it's a narrative thread with which I can compare a more stereotypical approach to the biopic form, and the way with which I'm Not There presents the same time frame. The era in question is Dylan's shift towards electric music, depicting the Newport Folk Festival. The section of this film following Jude focuses on the height of the electric phase, starting with the Newport Folk Festival, and the more traditional biopic, A Complete Unknown, directed by James Mangold and starring Timothée Chalamet as Bob Dylan, is fully about the gradual change, leading up to the Newport Folk Festival. The Jude section of I'm Not There is the most visually formalist of the bunch, be it the extended dreamlike sequence where Jude is singing Ballad of a Thin Man, with visuals matching the lyrics of the song, or the artificially high-pitched dialogue to express his drug use, or the casting of Cate Blanchett to play Bob Dylan. This portion of the film strays the most from a literalized reality and plays more with the artistic non-conformity of Bob Dylan. But back to the focus of what I want to get at with this little section. In Mangold's A Complete Unknown, the Newport Folk Festival is, well, shot realistically with no significant detours by way of artistic expression. Although not the typical biopic spanning an entire lifetime, the film's method of presenting the transformation of Dylan's music is generic. Good, but generic. The outrage at the adoption of electric instruments and Dylan's carefree attitude to this outrage is presented with an attention to the diegesis, not interpreting it through metaphor, but translating it instead into conventional cinematic methods. This is realism. Compared to I'm Not There, it's a little flat. So how does Haynes depict the outrage? Simple, with Jude walking on stage and firing at his adoring fans with weaponry. This is not literal. Not in the slightest. When the scene picks up again, Jude is on stage playing music, hammering in the notion that the prior scene featuring his outward violence was a metaphor for him actively not caring about the reputation he had built and the opinions of his fans. Although the fan sentiment is captured afterward as they talk amongst themselves and into camera, the actual meat of the movement is in that one simple moment. Through such a simple use of formalism, the Ballad of a Thin Man sequence is much more complicated in its construction, leaving this single shot as being just that. Simple. And because of its simplicity, the individual that is Bob Dylan is presented to the audience. He does things his own way, his own public persona be damned. He will, and has, reinvented himself as he sees fit. Thus, I think the use of the less literal and less truthful, bending moments of truth to fit the thematic dissection of an enigmatic artist, is more effective at clawing at the critical perception than a more quote-unquote realistic biopic. I think that it's more fun and innovative to apply formalism and a less strictly biographical structure onto these people in order to build a thematically satisfying narrative. I'm Not There is interesting in its deconstruction of the many faces of Bob Dylan's outward persona, and I don't think that it would be possible to have done so without the significant abstraction of his life. So have I made my point clear? I think there is more to biopics than being only a cradle-to-grave recollection of events squeezed into a 2-hour runtime. More pressingly, the public persona of these famous people can be boiled down to a central controlling idea. The controlling idea is then what is important for a narrative film. While settle for mundanity and mediocrity, the same formula retooled homogeneously for all these unique individuals. Each of these people should be approached in a way where an angle on them can provide an insight into an interest the filmmaker at the helm is fixated upon. These are not awards bait films. These are artistically differentiated from the vast majority, and I believe that they stand out significantly more. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you stick around, there's going to be a film recommendation like there always is at the end of these videos. Please like and subscribe, comment, all that jazz. Shit. I should have brought up all that jazz at some point. Well, never mind. I do weekly film reviews for recent releases, and this should be one of these video essays once a month, unless something comes up. Having separated the thematically minded biopics into 4 categories, I want to draw your attention to something which I didn't feel like complicating that lineup with: Ken Russell's Listomania. Technically speaking, Listomania is about the conflict between the Hungarian pianist-composer Franz Liszt, the title coming from the hysteria surrounding him during his life in the 19th century, and Richard Wagner. More so than any of the other films discussed in today's video, this is Abstraction to a degree, where the story is fundamentally propelled by pure audio-visual metaphor and spectacle. Take my word, I cannot prepare you for the levels of extreme visual insanity that Russell operates within. In the opening few moments, there's a sex scene paced to a rapidly accelerating metronome. Ringo Starr plays the Pope, there's Nazi vampires, and I gotta stop myself. From a purely comedic standpoint, this is a film which keeps throwing stuff at the wall. The first half of this film is dedicated to the comedy and the disorienting excess of it all. You don't need to know anything about 19th century composers to understand everything. The lack of historical context for me dissipated real fast once the absurdist humour took hold only a few minutes in. What's more is the fact that the surreal humour kindly gives way into a narrative about opposing rising fascistic beliefs, with a tone which stays true to that first half. It doesn't blindside you with a sudden shift, it stays with the same overall irreverence, just the subject matter grows significantly heavier. This was my introduction to Ken Russell. Probably not the best decision, there are other, more conventionally normal entry points, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I want to preserve the tonal oddity that this film is for you, dear viewer, so I'm going to promptly shut up. I just want to leave the note that this is crazy in the greatest manner any film can be. Well, that's all. Keep on watching movies, and form your own opinions. See you in the next one.